recordings of this to try and put these little segments up with her on YouTube, because a lot of stuff she does, well, everything she does is very important. And I'd like to see her get the YouTube crowd. There seems to be a difference in how people find this show, and the YouTube part of it seems to be better. Well, I'm looking at my video here, and it's like, well, we're getting a little skin there, boy. So let's bring on Janet Phelan, live from Mexico. Hello, Janet.
Hello, James. How are you doing this Sunday?
All right. I got up this morning early. I had a bunch of things to do, and I didn't finish them, which is my usual weekend routine. But I got enough done, and I got the show on air, so I guess I should get kudos for that, I guess.
I'm very excited that you're having Dr. Miller on the show. I think it's going to be really interesting. He's quite a fascinating person.
Yeah, he is. I almost want to say he's kind of like my idea of like a guru guy, a modern kind of guru guy, where he's got all this intelligence, yet he's a kid. He's like a little kid at heart. The last interview we did, he was like goofing around and joking, and instead of being all this, yes, I have these informations, and he's just like a kid. So it's kind of fun to talk to someone who's both an intellectual and fun, fun to be with. Uh-oh, we lost you. I don't like this.
I found him to be absolutely just a fascinating person to speak with, so I'm really looking forward to this show. I want to mention, we're going to be talking a little bit about NSA spying today, and I want to just mention that we're working on a rather shocking story having to do with facial recognition systems, and how, Snowden told us basically they're collecting all your pictures, but he didn't tell us why. And I've gotten on to an aspect of this that I think is going to, blow some of this stuff wide open. So it's not ready yet to be written up and discussed. We're working on it hard behind the scenes. But pursuant to that, I'd like to discuss a little bit about some of the recent sorts of developments with NSA spying. And this has to do specifically with an article that was recently in MIT News, where it's so noisy in here. I wish I could do something about it, but I apparently can't. Anyway, there's an article in MIT News recently which discussed how technology has been developed, which would allow the watchers, we'll call them the watchers, to pick up voice prints from inanimate objects. Let's say there are people in a room and they're talking, and somebody is able to kind of like through a laser technology to record the video of that room. They can pick up voice prints now from a glass of water, a bag of potato chips, a window, or even a potted plant. Now this is becoming, I think this is getting a little too spooky for me.
Let me. So, if I'm understanding this right, what's probably going on is that there is a way to measure the very subtle movements of those items based on the voice. I'm talking in the chip bag. So they're going to look at the vibrations on the bag, but they can do it in such a high resolution, slow motion or accurate manner that they can kind of put together because actually all a microphone is a filament moving with the vibrations, and there's a magnet attached to it, or a coil attached to it that goes over a magnet and makes a circuit. So it's not. It makes sense. It's not like science fiction, but boy, it is pretty scary how to protect yourself.
Right. Actually, you're absolutely right in describing how this happens, because the motion of the vibration when people are speaking creates a very subtle visual signal, and this now can be picked up and they can reconstruct the speech. So pursuant to this, I did a little research into NSA patents to see what sorts of technology they have been patenting. And I wrote an article, which is on New Eastern Outlook, entitled "NSA, There's a Spy in My Soup." Okay, so
that's pretty
actually,
clever,
I should have.
because the soup
Yeah.
the soup could vibrate.
Yeah, could do that. So, so when I went to look at the NSA patents, I found out that they have done a lot of work patenting technology which will protect them from other kinds of watchers, right? They've developed a proprietary method to locate a transmitter. They've developed patents for secure voice conferencing, and they've even patented a shredder residue dispersion system. So, people who are trying to maintain their privacy may often shred documents, but NSA has patented a method of dispersing the residue from the shredder.
It's called
it goes
the wind.
on and on.
It's called the wind. You
Yeah,
throw it up in the wind.
Well, maybe they've patented the wind now. Yeah. So, this is kind of what we're dealing with here, which there was a lot of the patents that were really kind of beyond my ability to even understand what they were talking about. The level of voodoo science was so great that I simply had no idea what they were patenting. But I found something, that kind of, I would say, it made me laugh. Okay. The NSA has patented an integrated child seat for a vehicle. That was actually the only patent I could find where they had actually patented something that could be generally useful, right? So the article was a bit of a goof, just kind of like talking about all this stuff that they've patented to keep themselves secure, while, as we know, we're wide open now. So,
no,
and
the NSA.
Sorry?
The NSA is a government agency, or is it a private?
It's a national security agency, is a government agency. Yeah.
To me, it sounds something wrong with a government agency patenting things. I mean, isn't it? I don't know. There's something about that. They're creating things that we can't use without their permission, and that's the government saying this. There sounds like something wrong there.
Well, we find this this aspect sort of to be universal in terms of law. Well, laws, for example, as well. For example, the concept of judicial immunity. Okay, so the judges are sitting up there and they are allowed by law. They have immunity even from corrupt and malicious decisions, right? So we have this sense of immunity and sort of specialness in a lot of different aspects when it comes to government.
I guess they
once again, it's like the two-tier system that Philip K. Dick wrote about in that marvelous book, The Simulacrum. Is a novel. There were the B's and the G's. The G's were kind of the government people, and the B's were kind of the worker bees. And the G's had, one set of they had all kinds of things that the bees didn't have, including access to information that the bees were not allowed to have. So this is kind of what it looks like. I want to bring to the attention of the listening audience one other article that was just published today on New Eastern Outlook, which is discussing some of the changes in legislation in the U.S. that will be impacting those who wish to leave the country. The title of the article is U.S. Throws Up Roadblocks for Those Wishing to Leave. And it's on the front page today of New Eastern Outlook. And it goes into FATCA and some of the other manipulations going on, which is going to make it harder and harder for people to leave the country should they decide that it's time to go. So
there's a little picture there. I don't know if this is there or putting it in, but it says Mexico only with an arrow, no USA returns. It sounds like a one-way door to me.
Well, what's interesting about while I was researching this article was I discovered that there's a lot of concern going on in that about too many illegal aliens coming into the U.S. But the fact is, at this point in time, there's more people from the U.S. going into Mexico, leaving the U.S. for Mexico, than there are people from Mexico coming up to the U.S. So it looks like the balance has really shifted in immigration that way.
Well, I know I've heard of this. Jesse Ventura being one of the more vocal ones who have a home in Mexico, which he maintains a dual citizenship. I think it is, but I mean, we hear propaganda, perhaps, but we hear of Mexico as this wild place where they stop you on a highway and rob you and whatnot. The Indians come down from the mountains and get you at night if you break down and this and that. And yet you have these people moving down there. I mean, is that all baloney, propaganda, or does Mexico treat people with money in a different level, so on?
I have heard stories of people driving down from the U.S. who run into some trouble in the border areas with, we'll just call them bandidos, okay? I've heard stories like that. But having myself lived in Mexico now for 4 years, first in the Yucatan, then in Chiapas, I'll have to say I've never run into those bandidos. There are some problems around the border area with the U.S., but there certainly are areas like Juarez where you just don't want to be, which is, of course, right across from El Paso, I believe.
Because I knew a guy who was 7 years old, and he's been doing this for 20 to 30 years. This is back in the 90s is when I met this man, and he lived across the street. He had a mobile home, and before that he had a camper with a card. He would drive every year and take his wife, who was Ecuadorian. He would drive down to Ecuador and drive back every year, and did that for years. And he's a pretty capable guy, but he's still old. I mean, a bunch of young guys around him, and he never had any problems. So I don't know. I mean, of course, everybody can come up with examples. I also know a guy who went down to Mexico, to Guatemala, I should say, who wanted to see his family and whatnot. And when he got off the plane, he got into a taxi, and the taxi took him to a section of town where he was robbed and thrown out of the taxi. So I mean, you hear all the stories both ways, I guess. Mute. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. I spent a period of time staying in a part of LA that is around Normandy, which is considered to be the hood. And I certainly know that there are parts of our big cities that are very dangerous. Los Angeles, there are parts of New York, there's parts of Chicago, there's, Detroit, you can go, parts of Miami, you can go to any large city in the United States and know that there are parts of town you should not be in after dark. I find Chiapas to be very safe. I found Yucatan to be very safe. I do understand that there are areas around the border, the U.S. border, which are not so safe. And I have heard some stories.
So the farther you get away from the U.S., the better.
Well, something that you got a point there.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. It sounds like it's all that stereotypical type talk. You can't. How could you block off a whole country? And so yeah, it makes sense that it's just a.
Well, there are certain. As you know, James, I think that at some point in time in the probably near future, the United States is going to become a very dangerous place to be. I have talked a lot in my reporting about the plans for a selectively delivered pandemic, for one, which is going to make the U.S., I think, probably a horror show. The technology that exists in the United States and very likely in other parts of the first world has not really come into full force in the third world. Mexico being, the third world as well as other places. So in some senses, I think that parts of Mexico are going to be a lot safer than the U.S. in the coming future. Where I am in Chiapas, I think it is not a police state. I think it's a very, safe and secure place for anyone, really. I wouldn't say the same about Juarez, but
well, I was down,
and I wouldn't say the same thing about South Central LA either. So.
yeah. I was down in Mexico City. Is when I've been down. The 2 times I've been there, and I bought some coffee that was from Chiapas, and it was the greatest coffee I've had to date. So that's one good thing about being down there, I guess.
Well, they have great coffee here. It's absolutely true. And cheap rent, and you don't get arrested for crossing the street on a red light. I mean, really, there's so much that's going on in the States. Criminalizing so many different forms of behavior. And actually, when I was researching the article that we're talking about, which is the U.S. throws up roadblocks for those wishing to leave, I came across an article by someone named Jeff Fonseca, who listed reason after reason, for leaving the U.S. Some of the reasons were economic, but frankly, most of the reasons that he gave were political in nature. And he did note that there are more Americans in jail now than there were in Stalin's Gulag Archipelago. There are a number of reasons, I think, that the U.S. is becoming less attractive as a place to live. And the interesting thing is that at the point where this is dawning on so many people, I think something like 150,000 people leave the U.S. every month. At that point, we're seeing now a lot of roadblocks being put into place by the U.S. to keep people from leaving. As you may know, if you owe back child support, you can't get a passport. There are now connections between the border people and the IRS, so they can flag people from leaving who have IRS issues. There's also the exit tax for those who are trying to leave permanently, which may amount to 30% of your assets. So there's a lot of financial disincentives in place that may make it difficult for people to leave.
Yeah, it's funny. We were looking on the outside in Russia, and they had the Iron Curtain. You had a government-controlled media. You had all this stuff. And now it's like we have the curtain, and you're actually looking to Russia to bring up truths. And I mean, I'm not saying Putin and Russia is great, but it just seems like, what happened here? I'm in the topsy-turvy world where everything's backwards.
Yeah, I'm finding Mr. Putin to be a very interesting force at this point in time. He seems to be taking the moral high ground on a number of issues where, that are really embarrassing the United States. And I'm finding these developments to be really fascinating.
All right,
we're living in such interesting times, aren't we?
Yeah, that's a curse. Anyway, we have the music going in the background. I want to thank you, Janet Phelan, for your work.
Thank you so much, James.
JanetPhelan.com, and we'll be right back after the message.